What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about a movie that is significantly older now, but I wanted to discuss this movie for a multitude of reasons because I think it's interesting. Recently, it was announced that this film series that's based on a series of books is going to be turned into a long form television series, which I have no idea why they need to do that, considering this story has been told already. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this is with how difficult living in the United States has been for a while now, with the really horrible administration that's running this country and all of the terrible things that they're doing. I've been really attached to comfort forms of media, things that, bring you joy and that, can kind of immerse you in a world that you can escape all of the chaos for a brief moment. And the Harry Potter series is one that's very interesting to me personally. And, I don't know how many of these movies I'm planning on watching, but I at least wanted to watch the first one. But I wanted to get on here and talk about it today because when I was a kid and this series was incredibly popular, I grew up in a hyper conservative Christian household, and I was told that these books were made by the devil, and I was told that these books were pure and total evil, and that I was not allowed to take part in them, being a minister's child. And of course, because I, was a rebellious kid, I read the first four of them behind my parents' backs. I read them, I enjoyed them, and then later into my high school years, I watched some of the movies. I hadn't seen all of them, but it wasn't until I met my current partner that her love and just complete and total adoration of the series when she was in middle, early high school, when the books were being released, she really kind of helped develop my love for the series. And obviously now it's an incredibly complicated relationship for a lot of people with the series now because J.K. Rowling has come out as this horrible, bigoted, transphobic human being, which I find so incredibly interesting and also disheartening that a person that has written this series that is about love and compassion and friendship and embracing your identity and love triumphing over evil and like discrimination against people because of their true authentic selves. You'd think that a person like that was writing this material in like a symbolic way for marginalized groups, similarly to how you think about X-Men and like a lot of these series that are released that feel symbolic, and for someone to come out and say such horrible, hateful things about a marginalized community, it really took me by surprise. But as I say with all art forms, there have been great pieces of art created by really terrible people. I don't think that that's like any sort of surprise. And I also think what's interesting is the amount of people in the queer community and the amount of people in marginalized groups that have kind of taken this material as their own. And that's really happened with a lot of different series and films over the years where like the initial creator doesn't have power over that anymore. It's all about how you embrace the story and what it means to you. And so I went back and watched this because I've never really sat down and watched it as an adult. I've watched these movies in my early 20s, but like I'm in my 30s now. I thought it would be interesting to revisit this and see how I feel about it. And so today I'm going to talk about Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is directed by Chris Columbus. Harry Potter has lived under the stairs in his aunt and uncle's house his whole life, but on his 11th birthday, he learns he is a powerful wizard with a place waiting for him at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. As he learns to harness his newfound powers and help the school's kindly headmaster, Harry uncovers the truth about his parents' deaths and about the villain who is to blame. So, I was really excited to revisit this. Like I said, I fell in love with these later than a lot of people because I just was not allowed to partake in them. And when I did, I had to sneak it. It wasn't really the same type of experience that other kids have. And what I will say, rewatching this movie this time around, it definitely has some flaws, especially when it comes to like some of the really outdated CGI and certain elements of the filmmaking that I don't think are perfect. But what I do think is this is a fantastic example of what a fantasy movie is supposed to be. This movie does something that I think works so incredibly well that so many other fantasy films do incorrectly. And what I think this does really well is it takes this character who is an 11-year-old kid that is going off to this place that he never knew existed. He's introduced to the concept of magic, these creatures, these people with incredible powers, and we're witnessing the magic through him firsthand. But you're also introduced to this very imminent threat of death and destruction, and you are not safe. Just because you're a child doesn't mean you're safe from these horrible things that are happening. And I think what this movie does incredibly well is juggle that sense of wonder and magic and just like that, immersing yourself in this world you want to be a part of while never not taking the threat seriously. And I think that's what's so incredibly important with fantasy is if you introduce a threat, you don't want it to immediately be all these people are capable of always getting away from it. You want that imminent threat to be present to keep the suspense for you as a viewer. And I think that that's what works so well about this movie in particular is that mix of like wonderment and just like childlike wonder through the eyes of a kid, and also the real imminent threat of Voldemort and what he is capable of. And I think that's what works so well for this movie. And I'm excited to tell you a little bit about it today. So I'm not going to go into the detail of Harry Potter because I'm sure like if you've existed on this planet and you weren't like the most sheltered individual like I was, Harry Potter, his parents were killed by Voldemort when he was a child. He was taken in by his horrible aunt and uncle and his terrible cousin Dudley, who treat him absolutely horribly like he's trash. On his 11th birthday, he gets a letter sent to his house telling him that he is a wizard and that he is going to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, in which his aunt and uncle do not want him to go, but Hagrid shows up and takes him to the school and helps him get acclimated with the environment of witches and wizards. And then he meets Ron and Hermione, who become two of his closest friends. And this film is his initial first year at this school, experiencing these classes, learning about the magical world, and also the threat of Voldemort, who, after Harry escapes him as a baby and that he is not killed, has a scar on his forehead and that is symbolic of his survival of that situation, and that Voldemort is still out to get him, and that he will have to try to find ways to fight for survival. So, like I said, this movie is the epitome of what a fantasy film should be. But I want to start with the casting. I really cannot get over how perfectly cast this movie is. Just from top to bottom, every single character, even in watching this, it was funny watching this as an adult and you see Daniel Radcliffe and you see Rupert Grint and Emma Watson. They're kids. They're young kids taking these roles on, and they do such a phenomenal job. They feel like real kids. The way that they read their dialogue, it doesn't feel overtly scripted. There's a natural element to the chemistry that they have. And I think the way they build their friendship up, especially for how these movies run and like where the plot goes, I just feel like that natural chemistry is what helps you immerse yourself into the world so well. And there's so many incredible actors and actresses in this. And I could go through and list every single one because I just think that there's so many incredibly talented individuals that were involved in this. But one of my favorite performances in a fantasy movie period is Alan Rickman as Snape. I think that's like one of the most perfectly casted roles because of who his character is and where he goes throughout this series. I just think the air of sort of mystery to who he is, and then just kind of his snide, rude, awful personality coming through, where it's like when we learn later on the history of Snape and Harry's parents, I think just this initial introduction to his character is just absolutely brilliant, and he does a phenomenal job. And then Richard Harris, who played Dumbledore in this movie, obviously replaced later on in the series, just everything you could imagine the character to be with the way that he's described in the books, just really fantastic. He just has such like an inviting, endearing personality that really comes through his dialogue. And like I said, I could go through the whole list of actors and actresses, but there's no point because they all do a really phenomenal job. I also love the environment of this movie. I feel like the way that they capture the human world versus Hogwarts and just the fantasy element and just the dramatic shift in the way that that feels. The visuals in this movie are really what keep you invested, and I love whenever the film is practical. I feel like there's a lot of really neat practical effects when it kind of jumps into the CGI, almost like PlayStation 1 type of effects that this movie has, especially with like the centaur, or like a lot of times when they'll go into Quidditch mode and it's like you can clearly see it looks like computer animated people, not real humans. That can kind of pull you out a little bit, but I can see they were trying to use the technology that was best available to them at that time period. And so there's an endearing quality to it, despite the fact that it's outdated. And I do think that it's, very well put together for what it is. I also think John Williams' score to this is one of my favorites that John Williams has done in his entire catalog. It's like the magic and the mystery of what makes this series feel so alive is present in the music, and I feel like there's so many incredible musical cues throughout the runtime of this movie that really just help keep you on the edge of your seat and keep you completely invested. This movie is over 2 hours long, and it does not ever feel like it. It's very easy to just settle down with and look forward to what's happening next. And I do feel like, parallel to the book, they do a really good job capturing a lot. There's certain scenes that aren't incorporated because I feel like they didn't really need to be. They're mostly just like exposition or building on characters. I don't feel like there's anything super important. There's some characters that are stripped out that I feel like, would have possibly added some more charm to it, but I think they do a nice job capturing the essence of what makes the series so special. And like I said, what I think works so well about this movie in particular and what it's representative of is the concept that love can overpower anything, and that the love between family and friends and, coming together for a common goal is enough to defeat evil, which is why I said at the beginning of this, it's so mind boggling that this series of books was written by a person who clearly does not have a comprehension of what love, passion, and empathy towards other people is. And it's sort of mind boggling to think about that. But like, I think the message of this movie in the book that exists is so incredibly important for young people to understand, because in a world where I feel like, love and compassion and empathy towards others is completely and totally devoid from society, having pieces of media that kind of showcase that are so incredibly important. And like, as a movie about young kids, exploring magic and learning and like being in danger, it's just such a fun, engaging experience that I really enjoyed revisiting, even though I'm almost 35. I still think that it's a lot of fun. It just reminds me of, being able to find joy in these fantasy worlds. And I'm looking forward to revisiting some of the other ones in the series and see how I feel about them. So have you seen Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. I think this movie is great. I think it's the epitome of what makes an excellent fantasy film, and I always look forward to revisiting this series. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.